A humanitarian crisis of historic proportions. Russia's attack on Ukraine has displaced millions of people. Many are seeking safety in neighboring countries as Europe urgently scrambles to respond. I'm Jafar Hassan, and today's newsmaker is Ukraine's refugee crisis. Russian and Ukrainian delegations met at the Belarus border on Monday for the first direct talks since the conflict began. It followed a weekend of heavy fighting and Putin putting Russia's nuclear forces on high alert. While European leaders are trying to both support Ukraine militarily and dissuade Russia financially, the continent faces a growing humanitarian situation. More than 500,000 Ukrainians have escaped to neighboring countries in the 5 days since Russia's offensive began. The EU expects that number could reach 7 million, and this is what they are fleeing. In Ukrainian cities under attack, Amnesty International has grave concerns for human rights abuses and violation of international law. The advocacy group says Russia's attacks, such as shelling apartment buildings and bombing preschool, could constitute war crimes. But there are immense challenges for those fleeing too. There are huge queues at many Ukrainian border crossings. Children, pregnant women, and the elderly are often stuck in cars or on trains in freezing temperatures. In some cases, people are waiting for upwards of 24 hours to cross the border. And that is after already long journeys from their homes. There are reports of racial profiling and family separation. Here are some of the stories that reveal the human cost of a country torn apart and lives thrown into chaos.
I want to ask all the nations, how is it possible to give arms to brothers and sisters, to our children? I'm begging you on my knees, Russia, take away your children from our land. I'm the same, a mother like you. I don't want our children to be killed. I pray to you for this.
We are here from 9:15 in this queue. 2 children in the car and 2 women. We are running from this war, shelling, sirens. It was a difficult decision. Our relatives and 2 brothers remained home, and they have as well families and children. I waited until the last minute, and also many relatives delayed their departure as long as they could.
36 hours, because there is so long traffic. It's a lot of people in panic and a lot of people scared and afraid and would like to leave Ukraine very fast and soon.
My message will be very short that it can happen with you in every home in Europe, because nobody knows what Putin wants and where he will finish. So if you see it on media, it's not about somewhere else. You should feel that it's in your home as it is in my home.
The United Nations is deeply concerned about how this conflict could scar a generation.
The escalation of military operations by the Russian Federation in Ukraine is leading to escalating human rights violations. We know the inevitable result of war. Civilian casualties, women, children and men forced from their homes, hunger, poverty and huge economic disruption.
To get a first-hand account from someone who fled Ukraine, let's speak to Natalka Sniadanko. She is an award-winning Ukrainian author who escaped with her 2 children. She has managed to make her way to Hungary's capital, Budapest. Natalka, thank you very much for joining us here on the Newsmakers. I'm sure these are tough times for you and your family. Tell me, what did you experience when you were leaving Ukraine?
So my situation was not really typical for people, comparing to people who are trying to do it now, because I was leaving my country before the war started, several hours before, so it was easy. The border was open, I had friends to go to them, and I was still thinking, I'm just panicking. I don't want to stay here. It will be short trip, visiting few days. And then we planned to go back at Saturday and Sunday, but it came differently. So now, yesterday we left Krakow, and now we are lucky to have friends in Budapest, translators from Germany into Hungarian, and they offered us to stay in their flat during their fellowship. They are translating now in Germany, and we can live here, be safe, and be calm, and try to help our people who are still staying in Ukraine or are trying to cross the border or need something, and so far and so on.
Natalka, are you in Budapest with your whole family?
No, I am just with my two children, and my husband went back to Ukraine to live after he brought us to Krakow, and my parents, my brother, all the rest of my family are staying in Lviv. Fortunately, it is not really dangerous in Lviv. We had no real bomb attacks yet, but all the city is preparing. We have a lot of refugees also in our flat with some people. We are waiting for some other people who are trying to go from eastern of the country to Lviv. I'm all the time contacting my friends in Poland who are offering help, who are offering some places to stay, some
Okay.
other things.
Natalka, why did your husband decide to stay in Ukraine?
Yeah, it is why other people decided he wanted to be there. He wanted to be helpful. He wanted to go to fight if he will be needed.
Okay, and please do not think that I'm being insensitive with asking you this question. Was it easy for you to allow your husband to stay in Ukraine to fight against the Russians?
How do you think? Of course, it was not easy. It was also not easy to decide to stay, not to go back. But I'm perhaps not brave enough to go back with my children or to stay with my country as other people do. And I decided to do it from here, everything I can.
Are you still in contact with your husband? Are you able to communicate with him?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
What is he telling you? What's the situation like in Ukraine right now?
He is fortunately in Lviv. It is relatively safe now here, and they're just preparing to get attacked. They have alarm signals, they have refugees to manage, they help the army use humanitarian stuff. We all do, but yeah.
All right, Natalka, what would be your message to the international community? What would you like the international community to do at this point in order to put an end to the war between Russia and Ukraine?
I think the most important thing we all have to understand, it is not just about Ukraine. It is about Europe, whole Europe, or perhaps the whole world. We don't know how it will develop, but a few days ago we also didn't believe we will be attacked, the war will begin. I think the most important thing, we should stay together, we should fight against Putin, against Russian army, and it is not just an alone staying country that fights. It could be in Poland tomorrow, or in Hungary, or in the other European countries. So just don't hesitate to make the sanctions harder, shelter our sky, and help us.
All right, Natalka, we certainly hope the situation that you and your family is in right now improves. And thank you very much for joining us here on the Newsmakers today. Now, Europe is racing to respond to the growing influx of people fleeing Ukraine. Before this crisis, Ukrainians were only granted EU visas for up to 90 days, but all EU member states have now agreed to accept Ukrainian refugees for up to 3 years without requiring any asylum applications. Many refugees are arriving in countries led by nationalist governments that have previously kept their doors shut to others hoping to reach safety. At the end of last year, Poland violently pushed back asylum seekers from the Middle East who were trying to enter from Belarus. And at the height of the Syrian refugee crisis in 2015, Hungary built a massive razor wire fence and rejected all asylum claims. Let's discuss Europe's response to the current crisis now with our panel. From Warsaw, we have Marta Jaroszewicz. She is an associate professor at the Center for Migration Research at the University of Warsaw. Sheila Reynolds joins us from London. She is the head of asylum advocacy at Freedom from Torture. And also in London is Christine Pirovolakis. She's a senior external relations officer at the UN Refugee Agency. Thank you very much to all of you for joining us today here on the Newsmakers. Christine, let me begin with you. According to the United Nations, up to 7 million people could flee from Ukraine. Tell me, how concerned are you about the crisis, the refugee crisis that is unfolding at Ukraine's border?
Actually, right now, our estimates at UNHCR is a little bit different. We believe that if the situation continues, if the conflict continues, about 4 million people would likely flee to neighboring countries. Right now, the situation is very dire. The humanitarian needs are multiplying and spreading by the moment. Every hour is different. So right now, 500,000 people have fled to neighboring countries, mainly Poland, Hungary, Slovakia, and Moldova. Internally, within Ukraine, the situation is just as bad. 100,000 people have left their homes. They're internally displaced. Right now, a lot of them have sought shelter in bunkers and basements. And, you know, it's very hard for us to get emergency aid to the people that are internally displaced right now in Ukraine. As you understand, the security situation is very unstable. There have been a lot of restrictions of movement in major cities within Ukraine. But our teams are still on the ground, and we are delivering aid, emergency relief, whenever it's possible in terms of blankets right now, mats, and food. Outside of Ukraine, we're seeing masses trying to, exit the country. There have been long queues heading towards Poland and Moldova. People, of course, have spent days traveling. The majority are women and children, as the men are being left behind to continue fighting. And as, of course, you know, the situation is very bad for the women and children that are fleeing. They're on the road, they're hungry, they don't have access to warm meals, or they haven't slept in days. And, they're waiting, many more hours in long queues, entering the border countries and getting registered by the national authorities there.
Christine, what kind of provisions are available for those who have fled Ukraine?
So right now, we have pre-positioned relief items in the countries directly surrounding Ukraine. We have family tents, we have blankets, we have mats, we have food items, and we're sending more supplies. It's just, getting the supplies in. Of course, like I said, the national authorities are responsible for registering the refugees as they're entering the country. We're there as backup. And, offering shelter along with the national authorities in terms of psychological support, because, of course, people that are fleeing this conflict, they're traumatized. They're traumatized by the bombs by the fire that's being exchanged by all sides within Ukraine. And so we're on the ground and we're helping in any way possible.
Indeed, a tragic situation to say the least. Marta, let me come to you. As I understand, most of the people who are fleeing Ukraine are coming into Poland. Now, Poland has a population of roughly about 38 million people. As Christine says, UNHCR estimates say about 4 million people could flee Ukraine if the war between Russia and Ukraine continues. Tell me, is Poland prepared to handle this refugee crisis, or would you say Poland has been caught off guard?
Okay, but what you said at the beginning about nationalistic government accepting Ukrainian migrants and so on, I think it's a little bit biased, right? And pushing previously pushing back migrants from Belarus, I think it's much nuanced situation, and like I am ready to discuss
Okay,
the issue.
expand on that. Why do you think it's biased? Expand on that.
It's biased because like it's not nationalistic government, it's like a Polish government, and it's also a Polish society that has been accepted unprecedented number of
So Marta, are you
refugees
saying there were no human rights abuses at the border between Poland and
No,
Belarus?
I am not saying, but I think it's not the right moment to, and it's not certainly, I mean, it shouldn't be put in one sentence, right? It requires more time to discuss this issue. But what is happening is really also that there are 30,000 military soldiers standing at the Polish border with Belarus, and that it was artificially created refugee crisis. I'm saying that human rights should be saved, but I'm also saying that we are in very serious security situation when migrants are used as weapons, right? By the Belarusian and Russian regime, and it puts Poland in very difficult position.
Well,
This
whether
is
or
what I
not
want to say.
it was an artificially created crisis, of course, that's debatable. But certainly the topic of discussion right now is the crisis that is unfolding at the border between Ukraine and Poland. Yes, the world appreciates what Poland is doing right now. It has taken everyone who has come into the country from the Ukrainian border. So again, coming back to my question, Marta. So tell me, is Poland prepared to handle this crisis, or would you say it has been caught off guard?
Yes, every refugee, okay, finishing and answering your question. Every refugee requires assistance, I agree, absolutely. And I still believe and hope that the crisis at the Polish-Belarusian border could be solved, right? And the people who are looking for shelter will find in Poland. So this is, but it's much more nuanced situation, right? This is what I want to say. And also, I hope that EU will get involved more in the field, right?
Okay, just want to get some clarity from you here. Is Poland prepared?
For now, Poland is prepared. I mean, in terms of like the next few days, right? I mean, Poland is prepared for a mass influx of refugees, that in the sense that, of course, we have documents prepared, we have like the shelters prepared, all the procedures are in place. But like the issue is about the unpredictability of the situation, and like to how big influx are we supposed to be prepared? I guess this is the same with Turkey and Syrian refugees, right? Because we don't know really how many, and they are different projections, but it's difficult to say. And secondly, for how long, right? Certainly Poland is prepared to accept refugees now for the next few weeks, few months, but then we'll see. But the most difficult issue is the border crossing points, right? There are only 8 border crossing points, and this is the weakest points because they are very long queues at the border crossing points.
All right, Sheila, let me come to you now. I want to focus on human rights abuses, because certainly wars are no strangers to human rights abuses, Sheila. Tell me, what are you hearing from your sources? What kind of human rights abuses are taking place in the war between Russia and Ukraine?
Well, we don't have any current intelligence about what's happening to people within within Ukraine at the moment. We are going to have to wait and see who arrives in the UK and accesses our services. Freedom from Torture provides therapeutic rehabilitation services to people who have fled torture from all over the world and have come to the UK seeking protection and seeking to rebuild their lives. We are yet to see the ones that will be arriving, no doubt, from Ukraine. And we will be there to provide our services when they arrive.
Okay, Sheila, then let me add one other question here. I'm going to give you a scenario. Let's assume for a second that I am someone who lives in Ukraine. I'm not Ukrainian, but I want to flee the war. What kind of rights do I have?
So things are moving very quickly. I assume you mean by rights, I assume you mean to move through Europe and to seek protection in a European country. So things are moving very quickly in terms of the arrangements that the UK and European member states are making to ensure that people can access protection. We've just heard that the EU has put in place a system whereby people can arrive in any of the EU member states and be allowed to stay without seeking asylum for 3 years. We are not seeing anything like this in terms of the announcements that the UK government is making, and this is really disappointing. I think the EU is showing how far the UK is falling short in terms of meeting its obligations towards Ukrainian refugees. And I think the UK government, is misreading public opinion on this. I think British people want to see the UK playing its part, doing its bit to stand with Ukraine, and that doesn't just mean sending humanitarian aid, sending troops into the region, and it doesn't just mean tweaking visa regimes or visa arrangements for Ukrainians and others, non-Ukrainian nationals with links to the UK. This means ensuring that those who are currently fleeing over the border, and we've heard the numbers, we've talked about the numbers arriving in Poland, people will continue to move, and they will move through Europe, and some of them, granted, a small proportion of the total will make their way to the UK, and what they will be met with when they arrive in the UK is effectively a country that's seeking to pull up the drawbridge, that's effectively slamming the door in the face of Ukrainian refugees. Our parliament today is debating a bill, and our lords will vote on a bill that seeks to dismantle the very asylum system that Ukrainians should be benefiting from.
Okay, Christine, as this crisis is unfolding, we are hearing some rather disappointing reports. Let me show you this video. Let's play this video where you can see some people of color are not being allowed to board a train in Ukraine. So Christine, tell me, what is the UNHCR doing to ensure that every asylum seeker, every refugee that is trying to exit Ukraine right now gets equal rights?
Well, right now we're advocating for the right, like every person has the right to seek asylum. So we've seen the footage, we're concerned, we're following up, we're investigating, and right now we're calling on all nearby governments to please keep their borders open, to allow people that need protection, regardless of race, regardless of nationality, to be allowed to seek asylum. And we're going to be continuing to advocate this and to make sure that this is something that people, have the right to do, to seek asylum.
Christine, is there still time for the international community to contain this refugee crisis? If so, what do you think they need to do at this point?
We are a humanitarian agency. Our focus is to save lives. It's to provide immediate relief to people. So right now, hopefully, UNHCR will support, countries that are looking to relocate refugees, so that, the sharing, the burden of, accommodating and is fairly shared amongst all countries. That it's not just Poland and it's not just Hungary or Slovakia or Moldova that are taking on refugees, that it's shared widely throughout Europe. So that's what we're looking, and we're hoping that countries will be cooperating and would be willing to do very quickly.
Indeed, and we certainly hope this crisis comes to an end. Thank you very much for joining us, all of you, for joining us today here on The Newsmakers. And thank you for watching. You can follow us on Twitter @_newsmakers, and be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. I'm Jafar Hasnan. See you next time.